You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 89, Speaking Albanian. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. In this episode, I'm joined by sisters Lara and Mira from Australia, who talk to us about the Albanian language. Lara and Mira tell us about their family connection to the language through their grandparents. We talk about their language adventures on some of their earliest trips to Albania. They explain how their Albanian seemed to be more frozen in time compared to how the language is spoken colloquially in Albania now. We talk about polyphony and polyphonic music in Albanian culture, unexpected things encountered when visiting the country, wedding traditions and celebrations that last for days, and some similarities between Albanian and Greek languages. And if you pay close enough attention, there are some moments where we get to learn some Australian English that doesn't quite translate to Albanian or to American English either. Thank you so much to Lara and Mira for sharing your story and parts of your heritage with all of us. If you enjoy this episode of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now support the show on buymeacoffee.com. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. And just one more thing before we get to the conversation. In a Speaking Tongues podcast first, Lara has a special dedication that we wanted to include at the beginning of the show. So take it away, Lara.
Hey Elle, Lara here. Just wanted to say thanks again for having Mira and I on your podcast, and wanted to make a very special dedication and thanks to my auntie or Halo Mavet for teaching me some more Albanian during the very long lockdowns. Thanks, bye.
Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Lara and Mira, joining me from Australia. How are you both today?
Hi, good. How are you? Yeah, really good.
I'm great. I'm great. So happy that we were able to, find a time zone between us and get to have this conversation. I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
So, this is Lara. My first language is English, and I learnt to speak Italian at school, and then more later in life, Albanian.
And the same, basically, yeah, our language journey has been similar, except mine took a huge detour into learning. Basically English, Italian at school, and then Albanian later on.
What was your detour, Mira?
Basically marrying an Albanian that doesn't speak much English. So, that's been like a huge learning curve. I don't know in the right direction, but it means that I can communicate, I think, judging by what he says, a little bit better than I used to. Yeah.
Okay. Did either of you, or I guess, what is your initial connection to Albanian, the language and the culture? And what has the process been like for learning Albanian?
So both our grandfathers are Albanian, and
Okay.
my grandma on my dad's side was, I guess, Australian, Scottish, English, French, and she picked up the language really, really well. I think they learnt Indonesian together too, and Italian, and she became an interpreter of Albanian. We had a bit of connection early on, but my parents didn't speak at home. There was this weird skip of a generation, sort of having to go to school when they were quite young, not speaking Albanian all the time. And then later on, we my dad reconnected and went overseas. My nan did first. And I think we just had a huge connection to the place after going, and
the people,
the people, all the family we've stayed in touch with. And we sort of early realised that we
knew very
have
little.
great language.
Yeah, it was frustrating because we had one cousin that spoke a lot of English, so we just leave it to him all the time to interpret for us, and got very lazy on the first trip. But then when he wasn't around, I was like, right, I have to do something to be independent in this situation, because I'm just like, they're all blah, 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 and we had no idea what was going on when he wasn't there. So, yeah.
So growing up, you had that awareness that, your grandfathers spoke Albanian and your parents didn't. So there was that generational divide. When was it that you got to that point where you said, okay, I'm ready to learn this language for myself and maybe even pass it on to, your own children?
I guess I realised as soon as I got married, I'm like, right, that's gonna be our first language now in our home. I can sort of use English in my work situation and with my friends, but every other moment of my life and with the baby is like Albanian, which is really weird because I don't have very good Albanian, and my husband does, but he also moved to Italy when he was really young, so he speaks Italian a lot better, like grammatically, and technically he's much better at Italian actually, and knows sayings and everything in Albanian, but of course, there's a lot missing there, so it's a weird situation where I don't know if my son will learn properly. I have to send him to school as well. So it's just like confusing, but yeah.
But that is an interesting, if I guess the sayings are really, and the way a conversation flows in Albanian, I've noticed the first time we went, we sounded a little bit too formal. I think we sounded like this Shakespearean version of because for an example, we would be very formal and say, "Sie mir chapa ben," like, what are you doing? How have you been? Sorry.
How's everyone? Naming everyone.
Like going through all the process that we'd been sort of frozen in time here in Australia. And then, my cousins on the street would be like, "Chiben," so like, what's doing kind of thing. And
like
then
slang
and saying all kind of different sayings, and we'd just be like, "Oh, we need to get cool."
Dorky language people. Yeah, that was funny. I think they live in the city too, there's a Tirana sort of dialect that is very casual, and all our family came from villages, so we had dialect words too, which is funny because they're totally different from formal Albanian as well, from village to village. Like a village can be 5 k's from each other, and they're
Right.
yeah, the words are insanely different from each other. So yeah,
it's like how people
Yeah.
in New York talk fast. I was listening to another podcast about maybe it's a generalization, but they do say people in different areas speak differently pace-wise, and it's
Yeah, I always tell people okay, so I'm born and raised in New York City, but I don't feel like I talk fast.
no.
I don't know if that's because of what I'm doing and I'm speaking to people who's, they're not from here, so I kind of want to be accommodating so people can understand me. But I think also it's like the pace of life is so much faster here, so the speech kind of keeps up with that too. I think it's interesting that you not only have that distance between where you grew up in Australia and, Albania being in Europe. So you have that physical distance, but then you also have the generational difference with what you may have learned from your grandparents, and how they would have spoken in their time. And you have that formality that's kind of there too. So, what was it like having to bridge that gap?
When a lot of the formalities here were from visiting other Albanians, so if someone offered you a drink, usually as a kid, you're following there, it's like really formal, no thank you.
And it goes in order of oldest to youngest and all that
all
stuff.
of that. And then when we went overseas, at a cafe, for example, you'd order and you'd say "Yulutum," like "thank you," "please," "sorry," and "thank you" all the time and whatever. And we just got like hit in the face with this kind of like, what are you doing? Like, why are you saying no when we're visiting? Why are you being so polite? Because at the cafes and things, like, people run in for a quick coffee and it's kind of like a coffee, "Nya cafe," or just cafe. And it's not rude there. Like, I didn't really think it was. I just thought I was being a big dork because that's what the reaction was. So I think the difference between the generational, like, here being frozen in time was really like we had a lot of just formality, and
It's tied to culture, I think. Like
Yeah.
there was a lot of weddings, and they kept, because they immigrated in the 50s, they sort of kept that structure going. And also because they were all basically from a small town or village, it was even stronger. So when when we've kept that here, they've sort of moved forward with Europe. They're like, yeah, city, cosmopolitan. Every transaction is really quick, and language obviously copies that. So therefore you get slang, and you get like quick words for really long, convoluted ideas and things like that. Because a lot of things in Albanian are long and convoluted, so you have to sort of, and so you have to make it short and sweet in that formal modern setting. And obviously, we weren't up to that, even with our schooling here for a year. We weren't really up to that. It was just a big wake up sort of thing, and like people our age didn't understand us sometimes, or laughed in our faces because we sounded like their grandma. Yeah, just things like that.
Yeah.
I won't say which one of us did it. I'll take it. But someone ordered a drink at some stage and asked for like "Nje god peshk," which translates to literally a glass of like fish juice because it sounds similar to like piersk, which is peach, and stuff like that. That's not even being too formal. That's just not understanding the difference in the sounds. Yeah, just getting used to like speaking quickly and hearing different, because people have different dialects.
Yeah, the sounds are also really hard if you haven't grown up speaking it. Like, and a lot of languages are like this. Obviously, if your mouth hasn't moved in that way ever, it's really hard to get it right. So there's a double R letter in Albanian, which is a big roll of the tongue, and the way also letters are placed next to each other, like G, Y, J are placed together for Jish, which is grandfather. So yeah, never saying things like that often just made you sort of get tongue tied, and that was also learning, and I'm doing it a little bit better now, speaking with my husband. But like, yeah, that's a really difficult part of language too, that you have to practice those things to sort of get them right and communicate. I think even if you know the words, a lot of language is about the expression of them, and Albanians are really big on that. So I find that now a lot easier because I can do that a little bit better.
When you were learning, what were some things that you did? Did you take any classes? Did you do any apps? Did you just rely on conversation in order to improve? Like, what were some of the things that you did?
So basically, like I knew, conversational, but nothing, because he's from the north too. So a lot of things he was saying I've never heard before. The words I just never heard. So really, he had to slow it down and break it up and tell me the things he was saying. Luckily, he knows some of the southern dialect words too, so that was fine. But yeah, I didn't do any formal learning. We just sort of nutted it out together, basically. And as situations would arise, I would, that's that now, and now I can. And I'd really hold on to it. If like something came up and I had no idea what he was talking about, I'd be like, this situation, that word, and like link them together. So for example, apricot is zerdalia, and we were talking about preserving and making some jam or something. And that
Food
word
related.
Yeah, or everything is food related basically with him and me. So yeah, I'd like, that's a really long word for a fruit, so I just put that in my head and like keep it there forever, sort of thing, in that situation. So that helped a lot because we were having a connection about situations in life. But yeah, we did a year of school, like a couple of years of Albanian school when we were teenagers, and that really helped me because I remember sort of photographically and write. I can actually write Albanian probably better than I can speak it, because I know how to spell. I still remember that stuff. And I've noticed like his family or my husband who went to school less, they just spell how they say it, which is most words are like that. But yeah, I sort of found they sometimes just write it and I have to interpret the writing into what I know the word is. So that's been interesting too. Yeah.
But I think as like I can get by, but Mira is much better with like a full conversation and communicating with people. So the first time we sat down to dinner and I heard her speaking like fluently, I started crying at the dinner table because I was like just pretty thought about what my grandparents would think, and yeah, was happy that she jumped that step, which I think that's how they did it too. That's how my nan learnt. Out of necessity, being stuck on a farm, they were. So
yeah.
And
Also,
then-
both their partners were another, from another immigrant background, so they didn't know the language either. And that's the thing with Albanian; it's sometimes like a code because not Italian. There's lots of Italians in Australia, and there were from the beginning. But with Albanian, there's very few from the beginning. There's more now, so you sort of, if you think you're having a private conversation now, you're not really, because there might be someone around that understands. But I think at school we found that fun because no one knows the language. Like it's just this thing that stands out because, yeah, not many people know what the hell. They think you're speaking French or they have no idea. And also because it's part of Indo-European, it sort of doesn't sound like
it's
other languages.
It's on its own branch, I guess, language branch. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, so there's been like a lot of conflict of where it comes from, but I think people are saying, Illyria, and then there's other links to it more Eastern Europe. But yeah, it's interesting that it's on its own branch, and not many people would learn it outside of, Albanians born outside Albania. Who, yeah, I don't know how Nan. Do you know how Nan like went from learning casually to being an interpreter? Because you have to know everything.
So I think she was like, I think she was like me at the beginning where it was part of the relationship. So she had to, but my grandfather spoke English anyway. But she was really interested in learning languages. So she was very good at the grammar and very good at sitting down. And she also taught Albanian at the mosque, the Muslim sort of Albanian school in Shepparton, which is a huge Albanian community. So she had to get it right. She was like in charge of that. So she made a point, I think, of reading dictionaries, writing letters to the family, things like that. The communication was big. She spoke on the phone for hours. I remember her sitting on the phone, and I think she was just really good at systematically correcting herself and making sure she got it right. So she was a bit more she was very disciplined like that. So yeah, I think that some Albanians in the community, I guess, thought she was Albanian because she was very serious about speaking the language correctly. So yeah, it was, and that's one of the things I sort of regret is not learning in that formal way from her, because she wasn't Albanian and she just knew it inside out, which was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so impressive. I feel like, do you think like we could do that in like the world now with everything we have going on? And
do you sit
everything...
at the phone and talk for 2 hours to someone overseas? I don't know.
During lockdown, I had a bit of a hissy fit, and I was like, I'm not texting anyone or getting on my screen anymore. I'm going to call you and have a call. Because I do remember her doing that a lot, and it makes room for a lot more detail and stories. But yeah, I'm not sure that. I mean, I've tried an app, and I actually didn't like learning through the app. So maybe I got to get a house phone, like a landline.
What was wrong with the app?
I'm not sure. I think the app was fine. I think it's how I learn. I was too impatient or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I like to like idealize like our grandparents' era and how they didn't have the phones and they didn't have 9 streaming services and they didn't have, so many apps, and there wasn't like so much noise around them. And I think like if you wanted to learn a language, Albanian, for the sake of this conversation, what did you have to do? You had to talk to someone or you had to get a book. And those two ways of just doing it, I feel like people were probably on the whole way more successful than I feel like a lot of us can be now, because it's so easy to just like turn on Netflix and not do it, So
I think you're spot on there. Like, definitely, yeah, that is a huge thing, because the only thing I feel like I've learnt inside out in my life without computers is like sound on an analog desk. I feel like I've finally got to like old lady level of that. Kind of like, now I can be a mentor kind of
That's
thing.
the goal. That's
Maybe I need to try this with language.
were there any Albanian traditions that you experienced with your family, I guess, when you were growing up, that once you went to Albania for the first time or in repeated visits to Albania, was there anything that you saw that was the same, or anything that you noticed maybe had like a different variation because it was maybe something that started in the 50s or from that generation? Were there any type of things like that that you experienced?
Clothing. That's not a
Like traditional clothing?
No, I think traditionally maybe we've held on to the processes a bit, like but there is a thing of like cheersing people until midnight and like the food's going cold on the table, but you have to go through everyone. And from the first time we went 20 years ago to the last time we went, that has sort of disappeared because people realize no one has time anymore, which is sad. But yeah, that has stopped in a big way.
But then again, on the flip side of that, when we went, maybe it has stopped a little bit. When we first went to my mum's village, which is Floch near Kocha, kind of close to the Greek border, we we had dinner at my mum's family sort of during, I think, at the end of dinner. I didn't know they did polyphony. I knew that it existed, but I thought it was more in the north and in the mountainous,
It's actually more in the south.
More in the south, okay. She knows more. But yeah, as we were finishing dinner, because we'd just come from the city, they started singing polyphonic singing. And so it's a group of voices together doing a drone, and then one person will take the lead. I was like in tears. Like, it was, because it's a real, it's a way of communicating and telling stories that are really connected to the land and the place that you're from. So because of the mountains and everything, in some areas the singing sounds different compared to like the next village over. So it was, and then, I don't think we'd heard that live in Australia. We'd heard my grandpa sing it on his own. He would do it like, he would do both parts. Like, he would do the drone. So he'd just be like, and then he'd sing a funny line, and we would be like, what is he on about? But then the first time we heard it with a group doing it properly, but it was still comical. Towards the end, one of the young girls started doing the lead, and our cousin, she must have been saying some really funny stuff, because everyone's just in hysterics, like trying to do the drone, be serious. And she'd say something about a person that had done something funny, and then everyone would like take off and laugh, and it was great. So we don't see that in Australia that much.
No, because it's sort of like history as it happens, those songs, that it's like they're historical songs, but then you can contemporize, is that a word, them, and sort of tell what's happening now in the song. So they weave it together, I guess, because Albanian was an oral language up until maybe the 1800s. Early 1900s, it was actually formalized into one language and written.
With the songs, what is the nature, like what's the subject of the songs? Like, what are they singing about?
It's kind of everything. It's mostly what's happened to a person. Like a guy would, be in love with this woman, or someone would be in love and it didn't work out, or it did work out, or family history. Some of them are a bit existential. Like I watched a documentary called Washed by the Moon that Mira recommended, and the guy's just driving in a car singing, making up a song from a like a melody he'd heard, but he'd written his own words, and it was just about life being bittersweet and just, what is this all for? And I was like, whoa. That's but yeah, I think most people sort of use the subjects of just all the crazy stuff that happens in life and love and land, and yeah.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. Can one find these on YouTube for people like me who've never heard them?
I think so. It's a bit hard for the older songs to find, and obviously, like the village to village, you can't really. You have to go there to hear those. But there's a great album called "At Least Wave Your Handkerchief at Me." I think it's called, somewhere along those lines. So that's sort of like it has a German producer, and they got together like a whole group of great Albanian musicians and have done some really classic traditional polyphonic songs, which are well known. So yeah, that's the sort of go-to now in these days. But yeah, I think things will come up also if you just type in polyphony. A lot of countries around those areas have polyphony.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool. Oh, I want to hear this now. I want to hear it live, like in Albania.
Next time we go, you can come with us. I think Candace is
Okay.
to come with us.
I'm there. I am there. You said that you've been visiting Albania for the last 20 years or so. Um, when you, more or less, when you started going to Albania, or maybe your first time in Albania, what was that like? What was that like?
We were sort of fish out of water, asking for glasses of fish. But I think it was just a whirlwind of the very first time was visiting. Like that's what we did because our grandfather left at a time where he couldn't go back, and we just didn't know anyone. Like there were letters and things, but we went around visiting everybody.
It was like a reconnection, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Millions of coffees. And just learning about each place. My cousin on my dad's side he actually knows a lot of my mum's family tree as well. He's got a photographic memory for things, and like he knows the history of each place we go to. He travels a bit for work.
He's one of those people that connect everyone together and remember the good places, the nice people. And he's just, one of those people that bring people together. So being around him was always great.
Yeah, and I think one thing in a later trip that I really wanted to start seeing other things, and I went to a cousin's school, like kids' school concert. So the music for me, that's where I got to see really traditional music and dance. We went to some crazy nights where there was a full band playing like Albanian pop music on stage, and we just got
so
to,
cool.
yeah. There's a huge clash of like really old tradition and then very modern stuff going on.
So, had you had a relationship with your family in Albania previously to before you visited for the first time, or was that like the process of reconnecting with them as you began visiting?
I think as we began visiting, because we obviously didn't have social media much back then, and we had, we got letters and
on the phone, like 3 a.m. calls and things like that. We sort of learnt who everyone was and sent photos back and forth. And after Dad went in the 90s, that was when we started to learn more about how they lived and wanting to reconnect, because I think before it was just this thing where our grandfather's family is there and we wish we could see them, but we can't. And then once he sort of went back and it was more of a reality, I mean, he went back when it was really still a dangerous place, I guess, and things were really fragile there, and it was crazy. So we all had this first introduction to it as this really unstable place, but still had the drive to go there. And I think still when we went there, it's still a bit loose, but like, yeah, just wanting to get to know our family and their situation, I guess, and how everyone lived, and have something in common rather than speaking on the phone early in the morning and not really understanding each other. That was the drive to go and know them better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of that being said, once you got there, maybe even for the first time or the second time that you visited, what were some of the things that maybe you had in mind, and then once you got there, they were completely different or completely opposite or unexpected?
Oh, I think I knew what it was going to be like. Just the warmth though was overwhelming, and like meeting people that reminded me so much of our grandparents. That was the shock, because I guess the similarities of uncles like to our grandfather, or their mannerisms, or the way they spoke, the jokes, the way they laughed. Like one uncle, our Justula, he's just like he was just such a funny man, and the humor and everything that sort of shocked me. I was like, I didn't expect to feel like my cousins were like my sisters immediately, and that's what happened. So
Also, I think it's like when you read a lot, or you sort of know a lot of what you think you should know. We always were very serious when we thought of like what my grandfather had gone through and what the family had gone through and stuff. And but Albanians have a saying, like, I guess, pachef, like for joy. And no matter what's happening in life or what's going on around you, it's like there's always something to do for fun or joy. And that's the thing. I think that's where all the humor and that comes in, like the funny jokes, the making, like interrupting a polyphonic song with a joke, just
not
like
taking things too seriously.
yeah, and finding any reason to party. Like weddings go for a week there, so like most recent time I went, there was a wedding that went for a week in the 35-degree heat with like blaring music every night. So we're just like, well, it's for fun, like you won't get to do this again, really, and why not stretch
What
it?
are some of the activities that happen in a week-long wedding?
Oh, well, in the South, I guess it's different. Like in the city, it would just be like they have separate weddings traditionally. So the woman has a separate family wedding, and then the husband, and he brings her there to his house. So that's very traditional. But mostly in modern times, like they have joint weddings. But yeah, in the South, we carry on the tradition here. It's pretty like, might be offensive to some people, but they for virility, they cut a chicken's head off and the groom jumps over it and they bury it so that they will have a child soon, and things like that. It's pretty connected to the older ways, like not to religion but to previous pagan traditions. And they shave the groom and all these, and there's a lot of traditions that I don't understand. So we were going to visit some graves in our village, and my cousin bent down and touched the ground like 3 separate times before we got there. And I said, what are you doing? And she goes, I really don't know either, but this is what we have to do. And so there are lots of, and when my grandmother died here, people came over from over there, and they said, oh, you can't get up from the table until you're finished because that's bad luck, and you can't let someone else sit in your spot or have broken stockings, or there's so many, like a million different things like that. So we learnt a lot of things, but it confused me because there are a lot of opposing ones as well. So it's like very...
And then that's what I don't know, when there's like, when people are not arguing but speaking about what you should and shouldn't do, then also jokes come out of that.
They got a cheeky look on their face.
It's like my auntie especially, because I'll say, what do I do, and be really anxious and serious about it, and she'll be like, who knows,
Yeah.
But not in a rude way, just in this way of like, I think because the culture has sort of gone from very traditional to very modern to like everybody from different villages getting married or connecting with each other or working or traveling, then a lot has been spread around that probably wasn't, before.
So interesting. I asked that question about the weddings because here a wedding will cost like hundreds of thousands, right? But it'll only last from like, I don't know, the reception starts at maybe 7, but the wedding itself starts at 5, and then you got to be out of the banquet hall at like 11. So you're spending all this money for like a quarter of a day, right? So I think like I love seeing cultures where they have these multi-day celebrations because not just practically like you're getting your money's worth, but it's also like it's also like being able to keep these traditions alive and pass them on to, and just like really share with your family. Like in the US, I don't want to stay on this too long because I will start ranting, but I feel like, unfortunately, like, and I don't know maybe how it is in Australia, but I feel like there's not as much emphasis on like extended family. And it's so nice to see people actually celebrating for multiple days with their extended family and maybe even their neighbors and their, people in their town. So that's why I asked that question. I'm like dying to be invited to like one of these days long celebrations so I can experience it.
They see you like outside their fence, they'll say, "Come in," because that literally happened to us.
That's what happens. You can't, even if you don't know people from a bar of soap. That's an Australian saying, sorry. Maybe.
Wait, what's the saying?
If you don't know someone from a bar of soap.
Oh, I love that.
Like you don't know them at all.
Got it.
Um,
We say like I don't know him from like, oh, there's so many things. It could be anything. I don't know him from a hole in the wall is one that we say.
That is a good. Well, we realised we were speaking like this in saying all these Australian things and trying to translate into Albanian, and they were just like, "What the hell?" Like that, it made the layers of confusion even deeper. Like it was very, very hard.
and then we tried to watch, there's an Albanian comedy show called Portokali, which is like orange, I think. And I tried to translate the jokes into English and I just still didn't find them funny at all. So I think you have to know a deeper level
Yeah,
of
definitely.
language. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Australians are like the kings and queens of very specific sayings and very clever sayings. So I think that adds another layer on top of it. So portokali is orange in Albanian. And isn't it also, maybe you don't know, I think it's also orange in Greek
Yeah.
too.
So that would be because my landlord's Greek, and we were speaking about this. There's lots of words that Albanians have either incorporated because there was no word, or because that border area. She's from the north of Greece. We're from the south of Albania. There's so many. Like the word for rose is her father had lots of roses at this property. So I said it one day in Albanian, Trentafil, sorry, I'll say it properly, not like an Aussie. Like Trentafil is like Australian. And she said, "Oh, that's the word we have, Trentafili." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So we do. We have Albania has a lot of words from other places, and my husband is making me realize that more too, because he knows a lot of old Albanian words from the mountains. So there's no words for things that come from other areas. So obviously introduced things have words from Turkey or Greece. Yeah, so
Like
that's right. Yeah.
chai is often one that's everywhere, like for tea.
Yeah.
Chai or chai comes from Turkish, and a lot of the
Yeah, and
words.
misri, like corn, the word for corn is actually Turkish, and I didn't realise that until my mum said that her father used to call it something else, which I tried to look up, and it was the word for mould, and I thought, is that because corn grows everywhere? But I don't know. So things like that. I always assumed it was an Albanian word, but when I looked into it, it was a Turkish word. So there's so many, and I'd really, because dolap is the word for wardrobe, and that's Turkish, and we use it in the South, but my husband has another word for it. So yeah, I'm trying to make sense of which word is actually the one that was originally used in that area, because you can never be sure, actually. Yeah.
How is that? How has it been, I guess, communicating with your husband and maybe his family in the north and you being from the south? Like, are there really big differences between the two, I'm going to say dialects, or the two, spoken
Yeah.
Albanians?
There are. So if he spoke completely in his village's dialect, I would have no idea what he's talking about at all. But he meets in the middle. So Geg is from the north and the dialect generally, and Tosk is from the south. But within that, village to village, there's words for different things that are different as well. And luckily he has a lot of friends from all over Albania, so he knows how to communicate with me and sort of meet in the middle. We meet in the middle. But I've started using northern words, and my family are laughing at me. They're like, "Oh, you're becoming a northerner," like that, the way I speak as well. Like they're really drawn out. They're like the Aussies of Albania. They're like, we say baba in the south for father, and they're like Barbie, like that. So it's a really like drawl.
There was a lady who grew up in Shepparton, Australia, who was Albanian, and she would like speak Albanian with an Australian accent, which is like one of my favourite things. But I think when she called her sons to come and have a cup of tea, she'd say, "Hayde pina chai," like that, which is like, "Come and have a tea." And it just sounded so good to me. Like, I don't know why.
The mixture of the two.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love a good cultural fusion. So you both have careers in the arts. How have you been able, or have you been able to bring Albanian language and culture into your work in any way?
Well, I've tried to start making a documentary about polyphony, which is those songs we were talking about. I interviewed before I went over there for a wedding. When I had time, I interviewed a poet who writes the words for polyphonic songs, and his name's Lefter Chipa, and he is an amazing man who we sat down with, and he basically chain smoked through an interview and was speaking about my drive for the interview is to talk about how nature reflects on the music of a place. So, I'd like to be ambitious and do a big one about Ireland and Irish music and how the landscape affects their music and language, and how music is a language, I suppose. But I started with him basically in Albania. That's as far as I've gotten. And he basically spoke about how the polyphonic structure and poetry and language continues on Albanian language, and that it will never die because it is sort of infinite like nature. It sort of reflects the things that happen in nature, what animals do, what the moon does, how people's emotions and life situations reflect all those things, how the cycles of life are continued through the music and through those words and the history of the country. So, yeah, I don't understand all of it. My aunties started helping me translate it. He speaks really like it's very confusing because he's a poet. He speaks really mysteriously about a lot of things, but I'm trying to make it more palatable for the doco, like so people get what he's saying. But yeah, it was an interesting process. Yeah.
You thought sharing recipes was hard.
Oh my god. How much sugar? What is life? I don't know. Yeah, so that's the only thing I've done there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Mine's not that beautiful. But when I'm doing sound, I've had to learn actually some words that relate to my work in. Not so much in Albania, but I have learned a couple. And then I worked in the Czech Republic and France a bit, so you kind of learn, left and right and up or down or things like that to communicate with the house technicians. But yeah, maybe mine's more on a musical level. did some ambient sort of style music because when I used to feel bad about not being able to speak fluently or whatever, I'd remember that
You'd learn music.
I'd learn music. And I think some of my earlier stuff was related to distance and separation between people, but also connection between the land you're on and trying to respect that, or actually respecting that in the same way. And also just
Also, the timing of the music, a lot of it was like a lot of Albanian music is like 7/8, and I think you were doing some of that in
some of that.
Yeah.
So I also remember what my grandfather's father's motto was, which is for every word spoken, listen to 5. And then I kind of thought, maybe it's your fault I didn't learn enough. You didn't speak enough. But no, listening for me is a big part of my job. So I think sometimes when you listen and then you don't practice speaking, it can be a bit detrimental to learning. But that's just how I am with music, with sound engineering, with everything.
But you're interested how traditional music translates into the pop world. I mean, there's a crazy amount of Albanian pop music, and a lot of it is influenced by traditional sort of structure. So that's something that...
Yeah, I'll send you a link. I did a radio show recently on community radio that in an hour goes from very traditional music to like Dua Lipa and Rita Ora. So, it was.
Are Dua Lipa and Rita Ora Albanian?
Yeah, well, Dua Lipa's from Kosovo.
They both are.
Yeah.
But they're Albanian.
I am today years old that I learned that.
I'm stealing that.
Also, Bebe Reja. We'll just name drop a few.
Are they really popular in Albania? Like, are people just like wild about them and like so happy because they're both so huge? They're huge stars, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they are living in the UK. They're British, but they are really popular if they do a show in Albania or Kosovo.
With young people, I noticed, like, because people around my husband's age, he didn't really know who they were, and he loves, like, I call it old man songs, but they're like really old-fashioned, old traditional songs. And, you know, we're in our 30s, and yeah, he just has no idea of that pop world. He doesn't care. So he's like, oh, I'll show you some cool music, and it'll be like this full-on traditional piece. And I mean, oh, yeah. So
who's cool now?
Yeah, that's right.
But no, I think the thing I like about Albania and Albanians here even is when there's a party, like we got to see Mariola Kachani and who came to Melbourne, and I love it that they sing traditional songs, but they sing sort of MIDI pop as well. And those people, those people are so popular. Like, and if there's a clarinet player who's really good, they are just like heroes. They at the parties, you'll just see pineapples or $50 notes like just thrown at the band, and it's like a tradition where people in Australia don't understand because they're like, I'm a poor musician, and then like you know they see my videos and they're like, oh wow.
Yeah, musicians are worshipped over there. So like if you are a band and you play a wedding or just a venue on a Wednesday night, you will get money chucked at you, and which doesn't happen here really because, like I said before, music is everything there. So people, just pay you well if you're good. They just, love you. So,
did you say people are throwing pineapples?
That's another Australian. Yeah, pineapples are $50 notes.
I'm learning a lot today. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify because pineapples are a heavy fruit, and I was a little concerned.
Spiky.
Do you hate this music or do you
and
love
they're
it?
spiky. Exactly. Someone's going to lose an eye. I'd love to hear about what you do, Lara. I know you have a company, Zemmer Bags, and Mira as a documentary filmmaker. Please let us know how we can support your work and maybe where we can find you, a website, socials, etc., etc.
Yeah, I've got Zemma Bags on Instagram. I'm in the middle of rebuilding the website and shop. So it's a slow process of building what it was supposed to be like a bit of a social enterprise, a bit of a way to pay some workers a fair wage in Albania to make these tote bags that a couple of bands in Australia have bought and supported, and the radio station I volunteer at. So yeah, it's getting there. I actually went to Turkey to try to buy material. I was specifically looking for hemp material, and I spent 7 days walking around Istanbul for 14 hours a day or something with my cousin who's got a clothing store. But I kind of, it was more about building it in the way of back in Albania, just getting this product made and maybe creating some awareness for the quality of stuff that's made over there, and the wages aren't very good. So, yeah, and at the same time promoting the use of what the old generation in Albania remember as using material bags, or I guess, what's that other material? Not jute.
I don't know.
Like,
Yeah.
canvas.
You're the fabric.
Canvas.
Like canvas.
Yeah, instead of plastic. So, I mean, it's an idea that hasn't even caught on here properly, really. So who am I to say? But some people are receptive of that, and it's just my own little wish to make it grow into something else. So yeah.
I'm an independent filmmaker, so I don't have any any online. I'm not like you. I don't do that.
Online.
Oh yeah, I made a documentary, but it's not about Albanians. It's about photography. So yeah, but hopefully the next one will be about something to do with Albania, I hope.
Okay. Is it online?
It sometimes is through the ABC, which is the national broadcasting company here. So it's called the Still Point Photography of Robert McFarlane, and it's like he's a photographer that worked his way, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, documenting Australia, the streets. So it's basically his life, really, his life's work. So yeah, you can check it out on ABC.
Yeah, I'd love to add links to those in the show notes, and hopefully people who are listening can check it out and see what you're both up to. I want to thank you both so much for talking about your connection to Albanian, the language and the culture. And this has been a lot of fun. And I've said this before, like I always love chatting with Australians because I'm always like, first of all, the time difference alone, like I never in my life thought I'd be sitting here face to face talking to someone like 15 and a half hours away. So this is like my dream come true always. Like I'm in the future. I'm living in the future right now.
You can't
Um
get delirious and just blurting anything out.
but thank you so much, and I'd like to end each episode on the same question, and that is, do you have any jokes, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Albanian to share?
Well, today is a really beautiful day here, and one day I woke up and it was the same, and my husband said "Dieli si pisha," and I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Oh, it's the sun is like a pine tree, but not just any pine tree, like a really, really big one. So the sun is open and spread out everywhere, like it's a really bright, big day." And I'd never heard that before, and it made me feel good that morning. And I thought, oh, that's such a beautiful thing to wake up to, like not just to see it, but to say it in that way. So Dieli si pisha. Yeah.
Dieli si pisha.
Yeah.
I think I have to leave that one as the ending because it's very beautiful. Yeah.
I like that. I like that one. Thank you both again so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure chatting with you both.
Thanks so much for having us, and for taking your time to talk about the Albanian language and us learning it.
Before I let you run off really quickly. Don't think about this at all. After this time when we've been talking, chatting, laughing, and we're going our separate ways, in Albanian, what is the best way to say goodbye?
Miropafshim is like the standard. Yeah.
And Shina and Brapa is see you after, so see you later. So I think
Not
that's
final. Yeah.
yeah, it's not final. It's like it'll happen again.
Love it. Thank you so much again, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.